Today's guest is Matt Kaufman. Matt was recently the founding marketing leader and eventually the VP of marketing at Qualia, a unicorn B2B enterprise real estate startup. Here are 3 things that I learned from Matt. Number 1, how adaptability, mediation, and advocacy helped him last 7 years at Qualia in a marketing leadership role. Number 2, his go-to motions for Qualia, thought leadership, events, and customer and community marketing. And finally, his excitement for the first principles thinking that's making a comeback in marketing this year. So let's get into it. Well, Matt, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Marketing Scientist. I'm super excited to have you here. And we're going to jump straight in. So you have gone from lawyering to banking and then to marketing. And building on that theme of sort of changing functions, in an alternate universe, if you could choose from another profession to switch to in your next gig, what would that be and why?
Oh, great question. I don't know if it would be next gig or another life. Hopefully, maybe we'll see next gig. It would probably be running a camp. I think being a camp director. So that's probably other life maybe at this point. But I don't know if you've ever gone to camp, but the impact and the enjoyment that kind of comes out of it is just fantastic. I met my wife as a camp counselor, right? So it's
oh, wow.
Camp's been very good to me in my life.
That's awesome. I actually haven't experienced the American camp culture, but is this a camp for students? Like what age? What are you thinking?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'm thinking students, and actually more so camp for summer camp, right? So whether it be a day camp or a sleepaway camp,
cool.
These are great organizations around the country, really pull community together. Families are fantastic. The energy is super high. And you just take from it. You create lifelong friends. So I know my wife and I and a lot of our friends have met so many valuable relationships in their camp experiences.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. And my kids are getting to that age where we might want to try some of that stuff out as well. Awesome. That's a great answer. Okay. So getting serious a little bit. So you've spent 7 years at Qualia and 5 years at Rocket Lawyer in marketing leadership positions, all while the general narrative is that CMOs barely last like 2 years. I think the often quoted stat is like the 1.8 or 2 years or 2.2 years, something like that is like the average tenure of CMOs in tech startups. Why do you think you lasted longer and in fact grew through the ranks at both of those companies?
Great question. I'd like to say it was something to do with me, but I think at the end of the day, it was probably good matches, right? And so that would be my first inclination is, not everybody is a right fit for every single organization and the other way around. And so I think it gets really special when you can match up someone's own career passions, the missions that they are excited about, and the rest of their teammates that they work with. And that really creates something special. And so for both of those that you mentioned, Rocket Lawyer and also Qualia, I was really fortunate to be matched up with a fantastic team as we continue to grow. Now, if I were to get a little bit more about myself, if I had anything to do with it, I'd say, as I've reflected over the years and even taken a lot of, I don't know if you've taken many of those evaluations, your Myers-Briggs and all that jazz, right? So I highly encourage people to do things like that because those are great exercises for both yourself and to understand your teammates, right? So for me, I tend to spike on adaptability, apparently, according to these, which I can gather. And my Myers-Briggs is I'm a mediator, so I think I tend to thrive in organizations where I can help act as that glue. And as anybody who's been in these types of companies knows, tomorrow is never like today, right? And so the openness to adapt and be open to that is something that I know for sure I've had to really exercise over the years. I'd say the last, if to kind of continue on that path, would be just actually starting as a lawyer, as you mentioned. I've taken the point of view that my role is a bit more of like an advocate for the company. And that as well has I think, been something that's helped me out through the years because I continuously go back to the philosophies of what's going to be right for the company. And it helps me get outside of myself a little bit.
Those are three really interesting topics, right? So adaptability, mediation, and advocacy for the company outside of sort of your role. If I may dig in on that adaptability point, give us a practical example of when that came up, where you had to be adaptable and where your, superpower sort of came to light.
Yeah. Well, as I'm thinking about specific examples, I could think of an anecdote or an adage, I should say, that I was taught early on, which is, there's one expression that is always true in good times and in bad. Do you know what that expression is by any chance?
I can take a guess, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah. This too shall pass, right?
Yes.
And so, with the adaptability, the things that come to mind are, whether it be headwinds or tailwinds, for the last few years, right? Qualia has been growing really well, right? And continuously hiring new folks, expanding the team. And, I think there's a phrase out there that other people have probably heard too is, learning to give up your Legos, right? And so when you start, I started with Qualia, it was 20 of us in total. I had one other woman on my team. We were throwing spaghetti against the wall for the first few months, trying to figure out what would really work. But as we did, we started to hire people up. And, at that point, you start to need to give up your Legos a little bit and understand, things that you were doing today are not the things that you're going to be doing tomorrow. And, that came along from as we started to build out and scale the team, understanding, all right, what are my strengths and interests? Like, what do I want to kind of hold on to? And B, what am I going to hire in for? And that's over the, last 7 years as we grew from, as I mentioned, 20 people when I started to, well over 400 by the time I left, really kind of changed that up. And being able to adapt to that is really important because the culture changes with it. And you can have a really good impact on it and a stamp on it, but it has to be very intentional.
I like that one. I like that one a lot. Giving up your Legos. That's a fun one I'm going to use again and again. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. You've switched from one industry to another. You spent time in legal tech. You spent time in healthcare. I think you started your own thing, and you've spent time in real estate. How did you think about marketing in those different industries? Did you have to change a lot of your thinking and sort of foundational sort of ideas about marketing, or were there things that were pretty consistent across different domains?
I'd say probably my favorite answer, or I shouldn't say favorite answer to something like this, but the thing that kind of comes up is I'd say both. There's definitely a through line that'll happen in any sort of marketing function in terms of what you're building out. Your classic, how do you get people's attention? How do you bring them through in the awareness? But I'd say the thing that made it really simple, I'm probably overstepping on that one. The thing that eased up the differences between those sectors was just being interested and insatiably curious about your customers and your audience. And what I found really helped with the transitions in sectors was not just studying the audience, reading what they read, understanding the sort of the industry publications, but developing genuine relationships with a lot of the accounts that you're working with. It's super invaluable. At Rocket Lawyer, for instance, we had some key partners that I worked with directly in the industry. At Qualia, for sure, many folks that weren't just accounts or contacts at that point, but became friends. And that's actually something that I've really come to appreciate about B2B is that ability to develop these relationships. And I just don't think there's a amazing substitute for that. And that is something that also then fills your bucket a little bit and makes the job even much more fun when you can actually develop these types of relationships. So that sort of accelerated the understanding and being able to switch markets. Now, then it's a difference of, all right, switching gears. And I wouldn't even say the marketing needed to change because of the industry so much
Mm,
as much as it did for the type of product being sold, right? And so I've worked
okay.
in organizations that were selling point solutions to horizontal point solutions at that across massive markets where, marketing tactics and your go to market can be very much aligned to performance marketing. There's a lot of intent based search. But then also, switching gears and going into a very verticalized market where there's not many accounts, right? You have a much more highly targeted account list. And that's where, you've got your thought leadership and your events are really there out there because, people aren't looking to make a switch all the time off of their systems of record. And so you really got to adjust what your go-to-market is going to be. And I'd say over time, what I've learned is, similar to what I was saying earlier about giving up your Legos, you also have to be ready to give up your go-to-market strategy if your industry doesn't call for it or the type of product you're selling. And that's where, certainly is being adaptable. If you want to go back to that question as well, you gotta develop and be open to building out new playbooks. Otherwise, it just won't work.
I love that answer. Very pragmatic. And what you're really saying is marketing isn't this, cookie cutter answer. It really depends on the audience, the product, the go-to-market motion, the breadth versus the depth of your list, right? In terms of your accounts, and everything might change. And that marries really well with your adaptability point earlier. Now, um, on that note, so I'm assuming Qualia, had and I'm sort of kind of putting words in your mouth, but had a smaller sort of target account list, right? It was very like specific. Here are the set of customers that we need to go win. And you went from like a team of 20 people across the company to then 400 people, and you saw the team go from probably very early stages to a billion plus in valuation. What are the tactics for Qualia specifically that you think were the most critical in achieving that growth?
Ah, um, so the quick answer to that is an amazing product, right? And I don't even say that tongue in cheek. I do firmly believe that, really when you have an amazing product, it certainly can't sell itself, right? I think we all know that and we should appreciate that, but it makes a massive difference. And the engineering team, the product team at Qualia, is just amazing. And I would say the empathy and the foresight of what we were building was fantastic there. Now, when it came to the marketing functions, I think it was that sort of partnership that we had with sales, with product, of course, and engineering that helped speed this up and really taking a look about, how are you finding that value and leaning in. And so, like we were talking about earlier, it won't be the same for any two companies. For Qualia, what was really helpful on an economic level was, of course, understanding that we had a North Star, and our North Star is making sure that our customers really had the best title production software out there. So that infrastructure, that core product, which we ultimately rebranded as Core over time. And so by making sure that you can make sure you are always aligned to your North Star, it makes everything a lot easier as you're continuing to scale because you know that that's where your key investments are. And then is what we did over time was we start to layer cake in additional value added services and products to our customer base. Because as you mentioned, and you called out, Qualia, we were working with and focused on a much smaller target account list, like talking thousands of accounts as opposed to if you're selling to SMBs in general, the millions that are out there on a horizontal level. For
Right.
us, we went SMB and then we worked our way up market in large part because we saw the types of products that our customers would need on the SMB level, but we also knew that on the enterprise levels, there was a whole different set of products and features that were needed that we would need to scale into. And so we built those out over the years. And so ultimately, as we started with the SMBs, we built the core functionality. We layer caked on some great products that also created, and get ready for, we should probably have a buzzword detector here, but our network effects, right? So that was very much a
Sure.
network effects business where it would bring in all of the partners of our customers. And so being able to really help them, not just with their internal operations, but work across the stack and work with their partners in that platform was a really compelling value prop for all of our audience and our community. And then that also helped us as we worked up market. We went ahead and really sort of minimized and then ultimately met sort of the product feature gaps that our enterprise customers would need.
Got it. Got it. So that's really interesting. Like I was expecting to hear all your amazing marketing tactics, but you really sort of zoned in on the product strategy, which is awesome. And, I often have this debate with marketers, like the 4 Ps of marketing includes product, and it's probably one of the most important things. Were you very deeply involved in product strategy and product development as a marketing leader?
Yeah, I was, and I think it's incumbent on any marketing leader, any go-to-market leader, to be heavily involved with their product team as well. Otherwise, you wind up creating silos. You miss out on what the real stories are. And I think there's a consistent feedback loop between the product team that's building the product and the marketing team that is, also help positioning and distributing the product. There should be a natural, if you can get to this point, sharing of information and insights that's coming through. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, you wind up effectively siloing all that information. And I don't think that's either great for the company, because you can't continue to provide the best value for your community. And it's not great for the community, because now they're kind of trying to figure out who to work with across those sides. And that's again something else that I've really appreciated about B2B, especially in vertical B2B, when you can kind of build that and create that ecosystem internally.
Yeah, this is great. This is great, and I'm learning a lot because our business is, also smaller target account lists, right? Thousands, not tens of thousands, and very much sort of mid-market enterprise. Now, I'm curious, from a marketing standpoint, you mentioned thought leadership, you mentioned events. What were some of the other slam dunk things that you did on top of all of the great work around sort of listening to customers and building that community and building those relationships? What were the types of other activities that you were doing?
Yeah. So, well, that was, you mentioned the events piece. So that was something that early on we saw with Qualia. I thought, making the move from Rocket Lawyer over to Qualia, I would take some of our playbooks, as I was mentioning, and we'd be off to the races. And that was one of my first lessons in, get ready to give up your old playbooks, right? Because with Rocket Lawyer, it was very much, performance marketing based, a lot of SEO. And when I tried to bring that over to Qualia right away, it just was not working. This was a very relationship driven industry. And so that's where we really started to lean in, but events are expensive, right? And so a lot of this was making sure that we were tying back everything that we were doing to our database and understanding the ROI. And so, I'd say, to go to your point about events and thought leadership, the two other things that popped to mind for me that, were really important investing in early on was, one, our customer marketing programs, right? So now as you're building up your community, all right, how are you actually engaging them? Not so that you're marketing to them to buy, but how are you marketing with them, right? How are you helping them tell their stories? Because that's what we certainly saw, especially in sort of this sort of vertical community, was people really wanting to hear from and understand from other like-minded companies how they're benefiting from the products and services that you're offering. So that was certainly something that I invested in much earlier on than I think many do. I think people are really starting to go down that direction now over the last few years, but something that wasn't super common when we started our journey about 7-8 years ago. The other, you might love this part, is marketing ops, right? And I know that's not necessarily a program, for instance, but it was incredibly important for us to have an infrastructure internally where we could understand the value of the features that we were giving. And again, I don't ever advocate for over engineering something, because people can very easily fall into that trap. I've fallen into myself from time to time, but you definitely need to have your table stakes taken care of because, as I've said to my team before, I mean, you have a lot of tomorrow problems, but inevitably your tomorrow problems will become today's, and you just want to make sure that you've set yourself up to not be caught flat-footed in areas where it's too hard to rebound from.
Got it. So recapping, thought leadership, events, and you mentioned this whole idea of community and customer marketing. And I've struggled with sort of how to unlock customer marketing in my sort of past jobs. What you said is something really insightful, which is how do you help the members of your community learn from each other? And as long as you focus on that learning, because people like to learn from their peers and not really from like a technology partner, it makes it a lot more interesting. And would you agree that that's sort of the core kernel of customer marketing?
Oh, 100%. It's that concept of, know your source, right? As who you're talking to. And so when I think about customer marketing, I think about it through the lens of how are we actually communicating together to help others out. And so those are, you may have heard of the 3 R's, right? So that's references, reviews, and referrals. You'd add in case studies into that as well. And so if you can build out an efficient system where you are identifying your advocates that are out there, you also want to know your detractors, right? You kind of want to understand, what is not necessarily working well for them. So you can identify that and going back to the feedback loop, get that, back to your product team, right? This is an example, I'd say, of how you can create a pretty healthy ecosystem where our marketing efforts in customer marketing, we're also helping inform the growth of our product as well. So 100%, I'd say that education is super valuable.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Okay. So you and I met through a couple of different mechanisms, and we didn't connect the dots until we met in person. So I think you somehow ended up on our blog and subscribed. But then I bumped into you at a Pavilion event. And tip for everybody who's listening, if you don't know what Pavilion is, you're probably missing out. Check it out, sign up. And one of the things that you mentioned at that event, at that dinner, was you got a handwritten note from your CFO when you were leaving Qualia that you had this really amazing relationship with your CFO. That is not typically what I hear from marketing leaders. How did that come to be? What advice would you give to other VPs of marketing, CMOs, to build that relationship with their CFOs?
Yeah, no, it was really kind of actually, as I was leaving it, I got a lot of great farewell notes, and in that he wrote, he was appreciative of my, I believe it was my sense of humor and honesty, which was, I would hope that, hopefully everybody would be both, certainly honest and have some sort of sense of humor, right? It kind of helps make the day go around. And, I'd say that was probably, a big part of it, right? And so we got to know each other pretty well as humans, as people, and we were pretty much always very open with each other. And I would say that was also culturally what was really important for our team at Qualia and helped develop that relationship was, we're here in the service of the company, very low egos across the company, and nothing was really about us as individuals, but how are we actually building this together? And I think once you can get past the idea that you are trying to create a narrative or a story to benefit yourself, but you're being as objective as possible about the go-to-market that you're building, it unlocks a lot more of the healthier conversations that are out there. And it allows for, I would say, pretty vigorous debate in terms of where investments should be made. And again, it kind of all comes back to this concept of being an advocate for the company and what's thinking about company first and what's going to be right for it. And at that point, that I would say the impact there is it helps build up trust. And so when things are either going right or going wrong, right, because both of them will happen, then you've built up that trust with the rest of your executive team, certainly your CFO, your heads of finances out there that can say, look, even though, this might not be going well, I know that when things are going well or they're trying to take a bet, they are, going to be very open and candid and, not be pushing for something that isn't going right for the company. And that's, marketers, I hope and believe that they are all out there doing that same thing for the company. I'll say for sure your heads of finance are always looking at that and trying to keep a good look at the bottom line of what are going to be the right investments. On the flip side, I'd say the thing for marketers, I'd say understand that your heads of finance out there are not the bad guys, right? I do hear a lot of marketers out there complain about their finance partners. And to that, I would just say, look, what they're really looking to do is make sure that the investments in the company are helping move everybody forward. And they're looking for ways to open up proper investments. And so if anything, I would recommend and suggest to current marketing leaders, future marketing leaders out there, develop a really strong personal relationship with your heads of finance, with your rest of the exec team. Just makes your job more fun to begin with anyway. But it also, I think, would make you more successful because now you've got that level of trust and candor where you can go ahead and know that you're all trying to invest in the company together.
I love that, right? Focusing on how to gain the trust with your executive peers around what investments are working and what investments are not, and just being open and honest and having transparent conversations around it. On that note, do you remember maybe we can talk about any hard conversations that you had to have with your CFO or with the rest of your C-suite about marketing at Qualia? What was that like, and what lessons did you take out of it?
Yeah, a lot of hard conversations. So it's picking which one is probably like picking your favorite kid. So I wouldn't say there was necessarily one that pops out that was the biggest lesson learned. I would say it's more the culture that was pretty remarkable for that time at Qualia, and it was that level of directness and candor that I know a lot of organizations do have, but I think we particularly had it elevated at Qualia, and that was the piece to me that was the most eye-opening and educational. Were those first few conversations as we were looking to place some big bets, and just how raw we were with the ability to get down to the brass tacks and the weeds and be very direct and objective about what we're looking to do. And look, I think most marketers, I'll probably overly generalize, we tend to go into marketing because we have a little bit of that creative flair. We do get very personal on things, right? And we're very reflective. And so I think for me, the big lesson there was to, really be maniacally data focused and speak objectively as possible. You can only really do that with good data, right? So that kind of goes full circle to investing in marketing ops very early on. But I think by doing that, to me, that was getting a little bit more outside of my comfort zone, to be completely candid, of being maniacally objective around the data and let that speak for itself. And that's where I think those hard conversations became a lot easier, because it wasn't about ourselves. It was really about sort of what are the numbers telling us and how do we want to place our bets together.
Love that answer, Matt. That's super, super helpful. Okay. A couple of last questions here before we wrap up. So, you've seen pretty much all functions in marketing: product marketing, demand gen, field and events, content, customer marketing, PR, communications, partner programs, marketing ops. Now, honestly, which one is your favorite?
Oh man, that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So maybe the better way to think about it is like, if you had to do something differently and where you would invest more or less, knowing what you know now, and specifically just talking about sort of the Qualia business, what would you have done differently in terms of investments in those functions?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say, from our product marketing and our customer marketing perspectives, we were very early on to invest there. So much so that I think I got some raised eyebrows about like, why are we doing that? Now that was, again, going back 6-7 years ago. I think that trend has now been pretty widely adopted, and so I would continue to encourage folks to think about that early on, and I'd likely repeat that. I would say if I were to go back and really think about things with the benefit of hindsight, it would probably be two areas. One would be how we really approached our demand gen programs. I think, again, the difference in a vertical SaaS environment is a lot different than in a sort of a horizontal point solution play. And so I think it's just really hard for folks that have not been outside of just a demand gen world to really open up the aperture and try out those different playbooks. And so I think that would certainly be one. And the other would be, how we really thought about our marketing ops functions and how they were continuing to scale. We invested early there, but, over time, things change a lot. And, I'm super excited about the next few years as we've seen new tools and technology develop that kind of help the stack out, because you talk to anybody and they'll tell you that they're struggling, that things are breaking and they're moving around. And so it's not unique to any one program, but with the benefits of hindsight, I think I would probably make some changes earlier there in terms of how we collected the data, how do we aggregate it, because that's one where I think if you can really dial in on understanding the life cycle of an account really well and getting that data all together and not having it come from so many different sources, you're just unstoppable, because you can really get good insights in terms of what's working and what's not much faster. And it's we sometimes think it could take a while to get there, or that investment might be worth it. But I'll tell you, time and time again, the better the infrastructure that you're working off of, the more efficient you are, and it makes everything go much smoother.
Love it. Love it. Very practical tips for everybody out there. This is awesome. Okay, last question. What are you personally most excited about going into the rest of the year? And I know you're kind of taking a little bit of a sabbatical type of thing, but I'm sure you're reading all the news about all the AI hype, all the new technology coming to fruition. What tech are you most looking forward to?
I've been very deep involved. This has been a great time to talk and work with folks and get an understanding of the stuff that's out there that I might not have been touching in my day-to-day. And so it'd be easy, I would say, to answer that question about all the AI tools and all of the technology that's out there. But, if I'm to be radically candid on this one, what I'm super excited about for this year is it's this interesting trend I'm hearing more and more is and excuse again if this is another cliche or we get our buzz term alerts going, is a return to first principles thinking. I'm hearing and seeing people kind of come back to that a lot. I think we went through a period of time where everyone was overly reliant on just getting and again, I'm going to probably go completely backwards from what I was saying earlier, just reliant on the data and not necessarily enough on first principles in terms of thinking about what's going to work or not. And so, you're seeing this rise of events. You're hearing talk about the dark funnels and people really understanding how their communities are working together, how they're choosing to engage and buy. And that's something that is happening a lot offline as well. And so, I'd say even though we've got a tremendous next year to 5, 10 in front of us as it relates to how AI is going to change up how we all work, I'd say the thing that I'm actually really interested in and excited about is, how are people connecting through those events? How are people thinking about just first principles and not necessarily over-engineering themselves, but thinking, hey, let's just use some logic when we're trying to bring something to market and understand what's right for us at this time. So that's I know it might not be the common answer of AI, but yeah, it's remarkable to hear and see.
I actually think that's fantastic. The return to first principles thinking and really getting to the core of sustainable businesses, sustainable, profitable growth is definitely back in vogue and back in fashion, which is exciting. Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything that the audience can do to help you? Do you write somewhere on the internet? Do you want people to connect with you? How do people get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, just feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Matt Kaufman. There's many of us out there, so just probably look for my face. I'm in black and white. And no, I just, if anyone is ever open for chatting, I've been doing a lot of advising and really enjoying these conversations and just getting to know more people in the industry. So always happy to have a chat and talk through best practices.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Matt. And hopefully we'll do this again in a few months, and looking forward to it.
Likewise, Pranav.
Thanks again.
Take care.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. That was Matt, ex-VP of Marketing at Qualia. We'll have many more fun and insightful conversations, so tune in again next week. See you then.